For my Africa research topic, I chose to study women in Rwanda. More specifically, I researched the impact that the 100 Days Genocide had on the women of Rwanda and how it influenced the country's future. My thesis states that although Rwanda was a restrictive and oppressive place for women to live, the 100 Days Genocide in 1994 led to the better treatment of women because they were encouraged to enter the workforce and receive an education as a result of the country's population becoming dominated by women. The essential question that best relates to my topic is, how does the past influence the present? Because Rwanda's history of major genocide led the population to be temporarily dominated by women, which resulted in permanent change to the country's laws regarding women's rights. Rwanda's past impacts their everyday lives because the women in the country can now work, own land, and receive an education. Rwanda is a small country located in East Africa. It is known for its breathtaking scenery and sometimes referred to as the Land of a Thousand Hills. The country also has one of the highest population densities in sub-Saharan Africa, with about 12.21 million people living in the small nation. Approximately 84% of the population is made up of Hutus, and 15% is made up of Tutsis. The Hutus dominate the population and government. However, they are an impoverished community. On the other hand, the Tutsis are a minority in the country, but are usually very wealthy. Before 1994, women in Rwanda held the traditional female roles expected in a patriarchal society. They were regarded as dependents on their fathers and husbands because they could not earn money or own land. Almost all of their duties were household related. They were expected to raise children, clean and cook, and they usually did not receive an education. Women in Rwanda were not allowed to have careers outside the house, so they had little to no input in society or politics. Over time, ethnic tensions in Rwanda began to rise. A Hutu revolution in 1959 forced many Tutsis to flee the country, making them an even smaller minority. Belgium officially granted independence to Rwanda in July of 1962. Ethnically motivated violence continued in the years following independence. In 1973, a moderate Hutu came into power. In 1990, forces of the Rwandese Patriotic Front, the RPF, consisting mostly of Tutsi refugees, invaded Rwanda from Uganda. In 1993, an agreement was signed that called for the creation of a transition government that would include the RPF. This power-sharing agreement angered Hutu extremists, who would soon take swift and horrible action to prevent it. On April 6, 1994, a plane was shot down over the capital city of Kigali, leaving no survivors. It has never been conclusively determined who the culprits were. Some have blamed Hutu extremists, while others have blamed the leaders of the RPF. Within an hour of the plane crash, the Presidential Guard set up roadblocks and barricades and began slaughtering Tutsis and moderate Hutus with impunity. The mass killings in Kigali quickly spread from that city to the rest of Rwanda, with some 800,000 people slaughtered over the next 3 months. During this period, local officials and government-sponsored radio stations called on ordinary Rwandan citizens to murder their neighbors. Following the 100-day slaughter in 1994, Rwandan society was left in chaos. Rwanda's population of 5.5 million was 60 to 70% female. Most of these women had never been educated or raised with the expectations of a career. In pre-genocide Rwanda, it was almost unheard of for women to own land or take a job outside the home. The call for equality was not led by thousands of women, but by one man, President Paul Kagame, who has led the country since his army stopped the genocide. Kagame decided that Rwanda was so demolished, so broken, that it could not rebuild itself with men's labor alone. So the country's new constitution, passed in 2003, decreed that 30% of parliamentary seats be reserved for women. The government also pledged that girls' education would be encouraged and that women would be appointed to leadership roles like government ministers and police chiefs. The country embraced Kagame's policies and even went beyond his mandatory minimum. In the 2003 election, 48% of parliamentary seats went to women. In the next election, 64%. Today, Rwandan politics is cited as a model of gender inclusiveness. Though devastating, the 100 Days Genocide was the primary cause of gender equality in Rwanda. Millions have been lifted out of poverty as a result of women entering the workforce. Rwanda is now a role model to its neighboring African countries for women's rights. Ultimately, the topic of women in Rwanda relates to the essential question, how does the past influence the present? Because Rwanda's history of major genocide led the population to be temporarily dominated by women, which resulted in a permanent change to the country's laws regarding women's rights. Rwanda's past impacts their everyday lives because women in the country can now work, own land, and receive an education.